here to talk with one of the most creative minds of our time, I believe. He described himself as a painter, but he is a genius that has directed projects combining video, lighting, production, architecture, choreography, technology, and storytelling. So welcome, and I'm just going to get to it. Tell us about, you have a very interesting career. You studied as a painter, but you now direct a studio. So I wanted you to talk about those career shifts. Like, how did you start in one thing, move to another, and then opened your studio in London?
First of all, sorry for being late. My bad. Yeah, so it was actually a triple career path, if I look at it that way. When I was young, I was very good at mathematics. I'm still very good at mathematics. I started coding when I was 6 years old. And so I thought I was going to code for the rest of my life. And then at 15 years old, my mother moved to Italy to be as a diplomat. And she knew I was really, really good at coding and maths. But she gave me a camera thinking, we're in Europe, you're going to travel Europe, take pictures. When you're old, you're going to be happy about having them. And little did she know that camera was going to become my best friend. And I was able to, it was such a close thing to my camera that I could actually take pictures from here. And I could be on focus there, and I knew every single thing that was going on in my camera. When at the same time, I was playing football. And I was very good at it. And so I got highly recruited by American universities at the same time that I got offered my first professional contract. And so I decided not to take my professional contract and moved to the US, visited 5 universities as per NCAA rules, ended up being at Creighton University in Omaha, Nebraska, in the middle of America. And the main reason why I ended up there is it was a great football team, great people, but also they were building a new performing arts space that one of the professors, Father Don Dole, who is a Jesuit, he was, or still is, a National Geographic photographer. And he promised me that if I went to school there, I will be working with him in pictures that will eventually end up at National Geographic.
Oh, wow.
So that was pretty easy, simple. They're like, yeah, sure, I'll be there. So my first summer, I ended up going with him to the Sioux Nation to take pictures, and I was learning from him. At the same time, I was studying psychology because I thought that's what I really wanted to study. And then I realized that I hated psychology because I was learning about people, and it made me a bit psychosis about myself, and I thought I was going crazy. And therefore, I decided to quit. And at that point, I decided to make photography my main thing. Because I started the photography, I ended up doing courses in different parts of art. In there, I met John Thien, who was my drawing professor. Then John really grabbed me and developed me from being just a drawer or photographer to actually becoming an artist and going into painting. And so all the major skills that I have come from painting. I graduated from school, came here, went back to Mexico, started working in all sorts of things, ended up at the Opera House in Mexico City. I ended up starting with a costume and set designer, but then the Opera House offered me a job, so I started working with the lighting guy, the video guy, the wigs guy, well, women in this case, makeup. I helped production, I helped the director, I helped conductor, I looked after singers, I looked after dancers. And as I always say, there's one moment in my life in which I found myself sitting like this. Beautiful sponge in my hand, bit of makeup on the other. And I had to tell the dancer, can you please open your legs so I can put this in your groin? And I realized that there was something really wrong with that image. And so I quit the house, started working in events with a good friend of mine now, as I was working in events. Eventually we did something for MTV. I became art director of MTV in Latin America. That got me to work with bands. Bands got me into lighting. Lighting got me into more video. More video got me into more trouble. I started touring, and then one day I decided that I was fed up with how things were going in Mexico, with all the problems, with the corruption, with a lot of my friends got kidnapped, which told me that I was in one of those pictures that I was going to get kidnapped. So I decided to leave the country, come here, start from scratch. First job that I did, I was running the chains at the O2 for Alicia Keys. Just kind of going like that. It was quite boring, but little by little, I started doing another job. Then I started programming for somebody else, then I started assisting somebody else. Then little by little just kind of got to that point where in 2011 my accountant said, Tupac, you're making too much money and you need to become a company. So that's when I opened Studio.
I think that's a very good problem to have, making too
And
much money.
so, and then 2011 was just one of those really weird years where I'd just come from doing Elton John, Sting, Alexander McQueen. At that point, Lee had died. I'd just come back from Sting, and then I was working with UVA. They won Coachella, so we went to design Coachella. And I came back from Coachella, and they won the Peppers, so we went to work on the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And then, as I was preparing my first performance piece, my first show, Nierka, I got a call that they wanted me to become Beyonce's video director. And so I got a phone call. 20 days later, we were doing Glastonbury. After that, I had to do a very high-profile job. Then I went back into Nierka, and it was just kind of this entirely weird moment where I found myself having 180 people between cast and crew to do a show. And I realized that actually that's what I really enjoyed. It was the fact of talking to the musicians, talking to the designers, talking with the choreographers, speaking with the dancers, talking with the singers, understanding how the technology had to go into it, how the videos needed to look, how the lighting needed to react, and in all that kind of world thingies that I was doing, realized that that's actually what I like to do. How do I get to do more of those? And it was like, work. So I started working more. And so, obviously because of my work in fashion, I was able to do more work with other different brands around the world. And one thing just led to the other. And now I find myself with a group of 26 people in my office.
What is the project that you are more proudest of?
Depends.
Okay.
I would say as a designer for somebody else, Players Atlantis for Alexander McQueen just means the world to me. The way it opened my doors, the way that I saw the fashion world, the way that I saw the design world, all that kind of thing. As an artist, Nierka must be the hardest job thing I've ever done, but it also gave me a full understanding of what I wanted to be, and the beauty of creating an environment in which every single artist, be costume, be dancer, musician, felt safe.
Can you just talk a little bit more about the
Nierka? Yeah, Nierka is, so bear with me on this. It's a three-act piece, or three-act piece with five-piece music rock band, 2 DJs, 10-piece orchestra, 10-piece children's choir, opera singer, 15 dancers, 12 artists doing art in real time, 13 screens, 9 of them on kinesis motors to move up and down, 4 of them on wheels so that they're moved by people, and then kind of creating this entire environment in which one human being takes the pain of the world, which is the sense of, I am going to die. And if I'm going to die, what does that tell me about me? And then you realize that actually, now it's your turn and you're going to die, and you're going to die, and you realize that actually all of us are going to die. Very simple subject.
Yeah.
So that for me, it was painful. It was so hard. I've never gone through a pain like that in terms of making the piece. The joy of making the piece, but also all the pain that came after because of all the dumb decisions that I made in order to make the piece. But that gave me a very good understanding of what I want to create. So that as an artist is a huge accomplishment that I love. As a Mexican, doing Hiku 2 years ago with Isaac in Torre Reforma and projecting 100 meters by 40 meters and being able to give a letter of love to the people of Mexico City after they had gone through the earthquake was one of the most satisfying things I've ever done, because I was talking to the people that I grew up with and to the city that I love, So that kind of fills me with joy. And I guess now as a incredibly crazy technique guy that is balancing different things, the last piece that we finished, Cosmos, is such a weird kind of shaking of the industry and what it's supposed to be as a genre and what virtual reality actually tends to mean, that I enjoy it highly, because it's like I discovered a new toy that nobody has. And it's amazing.
Can you, Cosmos, you won an award for it, but can you also explain a little bit more what it is? Because as you know, we're at Google, we love VR, augmented reality, every piece of technology that can help storytelling.
Yes.
So if you could give a little bit.
So Cosmos is, once again, bear with me on this. So Cosmos is, in essence, a VR piece. An interactor wears a headset and they go through an entire story. What makes it very different is that the interactor lives in a space kind of this big. And when they're brought in, they have no idea what's going on around them. What's going on around them is that actually there's an audience that is watching what the interactor is doing. The interactor, we have the headset, and the headset is then projected into a screen. And as we call this the performance area. And it's a performance area because there's two dancers, also known as the Shadow Man, who are in charge of the smell, the touch, and the taste that the interactor will have across the entire piece. On this side of the world, there's me, who I'm conducting live. There's someone that is doing visuals in real time. There's a secondary person at the back who's doing sound effects in real time. To my right, I have a cello, a violin, the keys, all synths, and also running Ableton. And then to my right is the voiceover, who never sees anything that's going on because he only has me as a translator. And so, depending on the movement of the interactor, I make decisions about extending the music, bringing the visuals, bringing a sound effect, understanding the voice, lowering the voice, changing the cadence. And so at all given times, I'm reacting to that person. But then as that person is moving, the shadow men are creating a choreography all around them in order to give them the smells, to give them the touch, and to give them the taste. So what you end up having is what we now call performative art, where it's actually as we all perform for the interactor, but once the interactor puts on the headset, he becomes one of us, and we perform to the audience around us.
And we can share the video so that people see what it's about. But what the story is also really interesting because you're telling a very different story. And if you could talk about how you came up with the story and how you're using technology to tell those stories.
Yeah, so we decided we didn't want to do it a simple story because nothing that we do is simple. So I was juggling with the idea of the memory, with the idea of loss. The loss of a loved one, the loss of memory, the loss of innocence, the loss of your childhood. And then we realized that all of those were encompassed within Alzheimer's and dementia. That someone that suffers of that disease will eventually have to deal with all those different losses. And we wanted to create a piece that would allow you to go through the memories of this man in order to understand how he could finally find hope of what was going to happen to him. We didn't want to do a piece where we're going to go, hey, you have Alzheimer's, don't worry about it, it's going to be great. No, it was more about finishing and going, having a better understanding of what someone with Alzheimer's goes through, but at the same time, what it means to play with memory. And because we can play with memory, we're able to play with the way that things look, the way that things appear in your head. There's moments that actually don't make any sense, and that's because that's the way memory is. And also playing with, the idea of smell is such an important thing in the way that we understand memory. You can smell something and it just brings you immediately to that place. And so we wanted to make sure that all those little elements were taken into consideration as we were making the piece.
That is incredibly interesting because it's a story told from such a different point of view. And you do that through technology, which is amazing. How do you get your inspiration? I saw somewhere that you woke up and wrote stuff that you thought of in the middle of the night. Mm-hmm. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, I live with I sleep with a notepad. Actually, if you see my jacket, I have a little notepad that I carry with me everywhere I go. So I have notepads I have 3 notepads in my studio, 2 notepads on my bag. My other bag has another notepad. My house has 3 or 4 different notepads. So wherever I'm sitting there, I just like, and if I have nothing, I'll grab my phone and I'll write a notepad and I'll scribble something in it, and it's just the concept of what we're trying to achieve. And I always tell my mom when she looks at me, goes, "What are you doing?" It's like, "I'm working, Mom, thinking." And it's true. I mean, the amount of times that I listen to music 24/7. I don't think I wake up and the first thing that I do is listen to Radio 6, and before I go to bed, I probably just tell Radio 6 to shut the hell up. But the whole time I'm listening to music, I find it very therapeutic.
Okay. To
let me kind of go. But also, I read a lot. Don't really watch telly. I watch a lot of YouTube though.
Oh, you do? Inspiration comes from different places, but also it has to do with your mindset and the way you think. Do you think that having such an international background, being born here, growing up in Mexico, then studying in the US, has helped widen that? And
yeah,
do you see that in people that you work
with? Of course it helped. I mean, it would be stupid not to. But I think, if I'm honest, the reason I have so many bloody ideas in my head, they've probably been in seed there since I was 3 months old. Let me explain the reason. And when I was born, my parents couldn't take care of me because they were starting their masters and everything else. And so a Mexican writer called Maria Luisa Puga, took me away from my parents and took me to live with her in Cambridge. And she is a very famous Puerto Rican writer. And so she actually put me into one of the stories where she was walking with me in the stroller and she was smoking pipe. And this Englishman came to her and said, "Don't you understand what you're doing to this little boy?" And she turned around and said, "His name is Tupac Martir. Do you think he's going to die out of smoke and cancer? No! He's going to die a warrior." And, I can only imagine when I read her books, how many stories that I get when she was changing my nappy or when she was walking me around or, so all these stories that have been thrown at me that are just probably sitting somewhere over there that eventually just come out. When I paint, the amount of times that I will just put up canvas and start painting in white. I would just paint with white paint over and over and over again, and I'll stare at it and I go, there's the figure. And once I found that figure, I would just go back to my sketchbooks and realize that figure actually existed in that drawing, and then that will come in, and then I will start building everything else. And so I think it's kind of the same thing. All these stories start coming in and start working in my subconscious and just sit there, and then eventually, when the soup is ready, it kind of goes to the forefront and goes, right, why don't we work on something like this? This would be a lot of fun.
You're talking about a canvas, and you've worked in canvases, but you've also worked on stages. If you imagine what your next canvas would be, anywhere in the world, what would it be? Because you've done buildings, you've done a stage. Just think, what's your next, out of the world canvas?
I mean, I can tell you what I'm working on right now, but I have. We currently have five different projects that we're doing internally that we're trying to understand what they're going to be. One of them is actually about Mexico.
Okay.
And how that period of Mexico relates to the rest of the world, and how the rest of the world is affected by what's happening in Mexico.
And how are you telling that story?
A mini-series.
Oh.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more? Or?
Not really. Otherwise I get killed. But yeah.
When is it coming out?
I'm literally just starting to put the thoughts together about how they should be and how they should go, and all those kinds of things. There's we're working on another concept with a bunch of musicians, and we're working on another concept. Everything is concept, and then eventually one of them just kind of comes and becomes clear, and you go, okay, that's the one we're going to take now, and and then we'll ride that wave and see where it takes us. I can't really be, when I'm in concept, I can't really predestine what I want it to be in the end. I have a vision of where it should be, but I know that from here to the vision, there's going to be a lot of shifting and movement and things like that. So I have.
Are you working with any big names on that?
No, just us.
Just you?
Yeah, I enjoy that.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I mean, because you've worked with some of the biggest names in fashion entertainment. If there's anyone you could team up and work with, who would it be?
God, there's so many people. And I always said I would love to design Pearl Jam.
Pearl Jam?
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. Probably won't make any money, but it would just be fantastic. Yeah, I mean, it varies. I mean, there's people in the art world that I want to work with. There's people in the dance world that I want to work with. There's people in the music world, but not only like rock and pop, but also on the classical side of things. Yeah, there's photographers that I want to work with. There's painters that I want to work with. There's like, I just like to play with everybody. It's like I go to kindergarten.
Bring them all together.
Bring them all together and just melt them with a punch. Like, something will come out for sure.
When you talk about talent, and because I've heard you talk about it before, you foster it and you sort of are a mentor to the people that you work with. I've heard you say
I would say a tyrant, but sure, why not?
You've said that some of the greatest storytellers of today are Mexican.
Yes.
How do you help foster talent? And where do you find talent and help it grow?
So I foster by putting them in a cage. And whoever comes alive, they're the ones that get to keep. No, just kidding.
Very Hunger Games?
Yeah, exactly, very Hunger Games. No, I mean, I guess I have my vision of what I'm doing, and I'm sure that if you talk to my team, they'll tell you a completely different story. But, a lot of it is... all right, so I'm a big fan of Jose Mourinho. Because of the way that he stands in front of the team and takes a beating and creates disruption that way in order to block the entire team so they feel safe while they are working. They will get a bollocking out of me at some point, for sure. But I try to think that I give them the opportunity to bring who they are into the project and not run the project as a tyrant. I always say that I'm lucky. I'm like the captain of the football team because I'm allowed to talk to the ref. I'm allowed to talk to the designer. I'm allowed to talk to the artist. I'm allowed to talk to, that's my job. And a lot of times that's where my job actually ends. The backside of it is making sure that they're finding the right references, the right angles, the right way of doing something, and when they mess up, telling them, nope, not like that. It's got to be like this, and it's got to be like this for this, and that reason. And then there's the moments that I really need to jump in and be very heavy about what I want as a vision. But there's a lot of times that I'm happy to just give the direction, and then they're the ones that have to take it. And at some point, I'll jump back into the wagon and make sure that they're, steer it the right way. I mean, I look at Muli, who's been with me now for 10 years. And at first, he was only programming and doing some designs for me. And nowadays, he pretty much runs all of the lighting division. It's still my face, I guess, or still, but at the end of the day, it's the company now, and it's him, and everyone knows that if he shows up, it's if I show up. And that gives that confidence. Same thing with PJ and the architectural stuff. And PJ is already a big designer when he comes in, but he's got now that bit of going, right, mate, can you go and sort that out while I work in the background, and I think that's the part of it. If someone says, I want to take this course, most of the times they'll say no, and then about 30 minutes later I go, okay, you can take that course, bit of tough love. So it is like a team. You have to manage every single person a completely different way. And some people need the arm around the shoulder, and some people need the bollocking. And you just need to find, sometimes you bollock the wrong person, and you realize that they have to be, arm around the shoulder kind of person, or the other way around with somebody else. And so you try to find that balance to make sure that that's exactly the way it is. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is I treat every single person like a human. I respect their feelings. I respect that some things happen to us, sometimes, and they need me to be the big brother figure. very much like you guys do. We take care of everybody in the studio, and from the moment you walk into the studio until the moment that you leave, there should be no lack of food, water, coffee, tea, whatever you want. I mean,
just like our offices.
It's one of those things that when they're making the shopping, people are around to go to Marta and go, yeah, can we get some of this and get some of that and get some of that and some of that? It's like that. The fact that you know that you are taken care of, the fact that you know that you do matter, and you're not just a number that is here. It's my job to make sure that all those tools that you need are there in order to foster your talent.
If you could retell or rethink any story, which one would it be?
Retell any story? I mean, right now I'm dealing with memories in another piece. I'm currently dealing with pain in another piece. I guess I will try to retell the story of language. And how we got to use the words and that we do. How do we go from to now speaking something? It'd be interesting to find the etymological, like all the history of it, how words are starting to come alive, why certain accents, like that would be quite an interesting thing to understand. And why don't we all speak the same language?
That's really fascinating. And on the technology side, you've used every piece of technology, old, new. What do you think is next? What's coming? And what will you start using?
Depends for what. Technology in show business, technology in
storytelling.
Storytelling? Okay. I'm a big fan of Notch. I'm a big fan of Real Motion. I'm a big fan of Unreal Engine. I think those are really nice tools that are giving us, volumetric is obviously right now the next holy grail. Everyone's trying to get that. Everyone's trying to find a way of intertwining and bringing volumetric to that level. I mean, the holy grail of it all is holograms. Everyone wants to do bloody Star Wars and make sure that Princess Leia appears right there.
Or bring Tupac on stage.
But they've done that with projection. I think it's my issue with holograms. First of all, there's no such thing as a hologram at the moment. They're all Pepper's Ghost or something similar. Don't be fooled. I think volumetric in that, like, to the way that we understand volumetric based on the sci-fi that we've seen, is currently the holy grail. If you can do holographic, there is no need for me to be here. I will be just chilling at home with a chair, and and we're having this conversation directly. And that, think about the amount of collaborations that you can do, the amount of things that you don't have to fly a singer or a dancer or you can just do it and put it in there, and I can see you in front of it, and I can collaborate with you. It's that can generate. Are you real? Are you fake? And then all the things that happen around it. So yeah, that's.
Well, maybe we could. We're at Google.
I know. You got enough computer power.
I want to open for questions, but first I want to start with just a speed lightning round.
Okay.
And I'm going to tell you 2 words, and you have to choose one. Okay?
Okay.
So, the first one that you want to choose. So, lights or music?
Light. For one reason.
Okay.
What was the first thing in the Bible?
I don't know.
God created light.
Okay. I don't know. Black or white?
Gray.
Oh, fine. Nyarka or Cosmos?
Nyarka.
Opera or ballet?
Ballet.
Pub or cantina?
Cantina.
Great. I want to open it. Anyone has questions? And just we have to use the microphone for the recording, so please hold it close to yourself when you're speaking.
Thank you, Tupac, for being here, and thank you, Andrea, for hosting this event today too. Uh, I went to see Cosmos, and congratulations! It was amazing. It was a great experience. And I'm really curious about what you talk about memories, because also I've been fascinated about the idea of memories, and also like in Sapiens, Harari talks about we filter all our memories, and we think of ourselves through what we remember or we think we remember. So there's a lot of filters in all those memories. And also with Alzheimer's disease, it's such a challenging, it was such an impact to see that this person at the beginning couldn't even remember his own name. And that's how the movie starts. And you think that must be so awful to be aware at some moments that you are just losing yourself, and you are, and so I don't know what. Tell me more about memories. Why are you so fascinated about memories?
So when I was playing football in college, I got a concussion, and I didn't know who I was for about 3 hours, and then a lot of my short-term memory was gone. So I can still function, and I still know a lot of people and all that kind of thing, but there was people that I would run into probably for a week, that I would run into them and start talking to me, and I understood that they knew me and they were telling me all these things, and I had absolutely no idea who they were. And it was scary as hell. And it was scarier the day that this girl starts talking to me. She goes away, and when I turn around to friend, I go, "Who is she?" She goes, "She's your ex-girlfriend." And then you're just gonna go, okay, maybe I should know that. So then that made me understand the fragility of my own memory and the memory of others. When I was writing Cosmos, I was adopted when I was 17 years old, and my adopted father is now suffering from Alzheimer's, but I didn't know that until January. And it made a lot of sense because I had called him a few months before. And when I called him, I said, "Hey, it's Tupac." He goes, yeah. "You want to talk to Joni?" I was like, "No, I want to talk to you." Yes, you want to talk to Joni? It's like, "No, Verge, I want to talk to you." Yeah, you'll talk to Joni. 1 second. "Joni, it's for you." And he couldn't remember that I existed, and so trying to go back to those kinds of things and understanding the frustration, and a lot of times the way that he will get frustrated at us because of something that was happening, and how you can start playing with it, and what is a memory? A memory is so based on the way that I think that memory is, when in reality, if there's a car crash, 20,000 people have a completely different idea of what happened at that moment. So it's so subjective that, I wanted to, and I'm still doing it right now with the new piece that we're starting to develop, is we're trying to understand what is that memory? How is it that we remember things? How is it that we attach an entire love to that red bucket, which doesn't mean anything? One of the biggest feuds in my family, for example, is my grandfather's wedding ring. May he rest in peace. My grandfather's watch, which I can tell you, I never saw that watch actually sit on his wrist properly. Since I knew him, that watch would just move up and down. But I know that my mother and my cousins saw it being stuck to that, because he was a strong man. And the third one is, being Mexicans, my grandparents got, on the day that they got married, a coffee pot, which always, every morning, will make the coffee. And that thing never got properly washed. It only got rinsed. and it has a flavor, and it has something. But my mom remembers it. My mom remembers waking up and my grandpa going, "Go turn it on," And then I remember growing up, and I remember spending time with him. And the first thing that I would do at 5 o'clock in the morning when I wake up with him was get up and turn it on and make sure it boils. And I dreaded waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning with him. But at the same time, those are some of my favorite memories that I have with him. Him and I at 5:20 in the morning, sitting on the porch, when it's still dark, when the sun's about to come out, and we're having that coffee, and the smell of that thing, it's just, and you look at it, and it probably costs somebody like £2, but it's one of the most amazing things that I can remember, and that's the part that I'm trying to get to. Our minds are so fragile that anything can be blanked in an instant, and so how do we hold on to them? What makes them so special? What makes them so special to me?
How do you deal with being stuck and with artistic crisis, basically, when nothing just is
when nothing
being produced?
flows?
Yeah, when nothing flows. It's just like, yeah.
Many things. So I either go for a run. I play all sorts of different music to see what mood I'm in, to try to figure out where it is. I grab my notebooks, either one of them, and I start drawing on top of them. I'll grab a book. One that is not really advisable, but I do it whenever I'm really stuck. I go and I get absolutely stupidly drunk. Like, I'm telling you, I like horribly drunk. To the point that I can't remember. Like when you get home and you kind of wake up like, oh God. Because there's two things that come out of that. Either in the middle of the night, I decided to scribble something or record something that actually unlocks it, or the following day, I feel like so bad that I can't move. And because I can't move, my brain has to think about something. And then something kind of comes out and pops out. I meditate a lot, so I meditate every morning and every night. And I think that allows me to, the girls would tell you that I'm really good at going in, sitting down at my desk, and going, and I'm done with that bit. And and I come back again, but I don't spend a lot of time in my desk. I'll do 20 minutes, and then I'll get up and I'll go visit, talk, visit, coffee, tea, blah, 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 blah. Come back, and then go again, and just kind of keep myself occupied on all sorts of different things. So, yeah, I will say that's kind of the juggling of. I spend a lot of time in planes too, so those are really good.
For thinking.
They're great. I have this thing where sometimes, from the moment that I get on the express, on my way to Heathrow, I don't talk to anybody until the seatbelt sign has been turned off. And that's about 2.5 hours worth of your life.
Not even for check-in. Check out, what?
Phone. No need to talk to anybody.
Okay. Sure.
Headphones.
I check in bags always, so
yeah. Smart traveler.
Yeah.
Hola, Tupac.
Hola.
It would be really nice to me. I've heard you many times talk about your collaborations with different companies, specifically tech companies, to push the boundaries of what software can do for you, for your creativity, and for the solutions that you're trying to offer for your projects. I think that's invaluable for artists, and that's the only way that we can progress. So if you can talk about that engagement.
Yeah, I mean, because I started coding when I was 6 years old, software is mega important for me. I mean, I think that coding is an entire art by itself. And by combining different softwares or combining different ideas of what things can do, you kind of go, well, you get me here and you kind of get there. Well, I need a piece of software that does this and that does that. Well, that means that one's going that way, that one's going that way, so I need to make something that goes that. Oh, but I want to interselect that. Well, let's code that bit, and that goes in, and then that has to come in. And then you start kind of molding this proprietary, weird combination of things that, because no one really thinks about how that can work together with that can work together and how you just smash it. You end up always coming up with, sometimes you come up with stuff and you go, yeah, forget it. Just toss it away. Or a lot of times you finish and go, that's actually quite interesting. But actually the main pipeline over here is really interesting, but actually what's really interesting is that bit over there. And now let's develop to that side. So that's what, is you might have a goal in mind, and you always got to have a goal in mind. But maybe that goal, you finish it, but it's actually something else that comes out of it that actually is more interesting and that you care more about. So, like right now, we're using an engine in one software that is actually triggering another software that is then going through a protocol that is not meant to be using it. And then that goes to the headset. And the only way we found that's the way that we wanted to do the pipeline is by playing together. But by doing those three things, we've come up with something no one's ever thought about. And that gives the experience a completely new way of understanding and frees, just gives a brand new freedom in order to achieve something different with what we're trying to do with the piece. It's good fun.
Yeah. Lots of connections in your head.
But that's what makes it fun, actually. I mean, I spend a lot of time researching and doing things, and every now and then we're going to, all right, so that's a Google product, and that's a Google product, and that's a Google product. And then you send an email to the guys in this development. Hey, have you guys talked to those guys? No, never. Have you guys talked to those guys? No, never. Have you guys talked to those guys? No, no. You're in the bloody building, same bloody space, and no one talks to each other.
We encourage collaboration here, talking to each other.
Hi, Tupac. I have a question about the creative process, because you talk a lot about, like, for example, when you talk about smell and about like sensorial exploration and how like you have this connection with painting, which is like a very kind of a craft process, but you also work a lot with technology. And I feel like sometimes, depending also in the type of technology you use, there's like a conflict between these two, also regarding like senses, because like creating like handcraft creation like involves all of your senses, while like creating like through technology sometimes doesn't. So I don't know, like, how's the creative process like?
I mean, in that sense, everything goes back to painting. And that's why I always say that I got better as a painter. Because every single thing that I do always gets rethought in the way that I would do a painting. And how does that smell? What is the synesthesia of what I'm seeing digitally? And it's almost like, if I could taste it, what would it taste like? If I could touch it, what would I touch it like? What would be the texture? How can I do it? And that's, I'm very physical. I move a lot, and I try to understand it. And Muli laughs at me when I go, yeah, it has to be like this, and then that, and then, And for me, that has sound. That's even though there's no sound, it has to do. You got it? And he's like, I think so. And he goes and programs and goes, is that what you wanted? It's like, oh yeah, maybe a bit more. Oh, okay, yeah. And he's gotten to the point that when he's explaining now to other programs, like, yeah, he's gotten that approach of talking and saying it. And when we were doing Cosmos, we were looking at some of the textures and some of the elements, and you go, no, it has to be felt, it has to feel soft. It has to look this, it's like a marshmallow. It's like this, and you need to, by putting those elements that don't exist digitally in a certain way, when you're making the assets, when you're making the things, when you understand what you're trying to create, it just gives it such a different layer, so that when you're creating it, you have that vision. When we were doing the smells, it was hilarious. So the guy who does smells is called a nose. And I remember we were sitting down, it was four of us sitting down, smelling all these molecules. And when he left, there was such a weird thing, because we all started smelling things that you weren't used to smell, because our sense had been heightened. But when we're doing the smells, we divided them in a certain way. There was smells that were physical. So you are in a derelict, damped house. Right, the smell has to be of damp, and it kind of has to be of musk. So what are those two molecules? And we found them and went, that, if I'm in that room, that's what that room should smell like. But then there were smells that were all about emotion. And how does it feel to be a child? What did being a child smell like? And it's like, oh my God, being a child smelled like cotton candy, and and super sweets, and that entire scene, that's what it smells like, because it gives you that sense of, I am a child. and I'm seeing the world as a child. You know, the last scene smells like roses, and the violin plays a very Bach-like type of music at the end, and it's this idea of the universe is meant to sound like that and smell like that, you know. But none of us know, because no one goes, what is that? You know? but we have that in our subconscious into the world that we have. So, you know, I am not unaware of all the history and all the background that we have from years and years and years of being told other things. And that, whether you want it or not, goes back to your conscious. I'm developing a piece right now. We've probably been working on it for about 5 years, about music and how music is understood in different parts of the world. The same piece of music, you know. And so maybe one piece of music is seen as amazing in Midwest America, is seen as white trash in the northeast of the US, is seen as something that no one wants to listen to in Africa, but it actually is seen as torture in the Arab world, you know. And you have to take that same piece of music, nothing changes, but it's how it is understood across the different cultures and because of all the humongous background that we bring and the baggage that we bring. My exploration at the moment as an artist is all based on what happens if I don't change if I don't change the music, if I don't change the language, I don't change the dialogue, I don't change anything. The only thing that I will change is the format. And by changing the format, how is that interpreted? And then, then you start pulling stuff, because we are all bringing our own things to that format.
I just want to follow that question up, because for me, when you're creating something, you're creating a 4D element in your mind, and you have to transform that through the programming, trying to explain what you really want when it's being programmed and it's being done, and you've made a very clear representation on how that works. But I'd like to ask you about an element that you mentioned before, like when you're creating something, on top of it smelling in a particular way in your mind and having a specific shape, it also has emotion. And you mentioned something about dealing with pain, and you mentioned dealing with memories, and of course, you know, talking about Alzheimer's it's very, very relevant nowadays. So how can you explain all of that? Because what you said about music, the same piece of music being interpreted and understood differently in different parts of the world, or different parts of one same country, it's all about emotion. And music, for me particularly, music is key to many, many things. But of course, it brings emotion. It brings you back. It brings memories back. It brings, you know, a lot of those things. And how can you effectively transform and explain what you want when it's being programmed? Because emotion is very, very difficult to identify, because it can change, and its interpretation is completely different.
True. I guess the only thing I can do as a human being is put myself in other people's shoes, and put myself about, how do I feel about this emotion? If my background and all my this is this, you know, how interested or disinterested would I be to this piece of music? How interested or disinterested I'll be to that character? And the only way that I can actually approach that is by actually abstracting what is true and in essence of what I want to say, and understanding universally, and understand what that universal language is that all of us think about. You know, so when I'm talking about, when I wrote Nierka and I realized that I was going to die, that is something that goes through every single mind of every single person you will ever meet. You know, you're not alone in anything. You're not unique in dying. You know, we all are. When I think about pain, we all have pain. Physical, psychological, mental, you know, emotional. And it's how I can find that fiber that actually threads a line that doesn't matter what is your baggage. we all have this conscious element that we're all thinking about and we all are part of. Memory, obviously, is something that we all get scared of. I wrote another piece about fear because we're all afraid. The question is, until what moment are you afraid that fear doesn't allow you to do anything? And at what moment does fear transform into the thing that allows you to know that fear is good, but fear won't stop me, you know? And it's finding those universal themes and then finding threads that allow me to bring it in different ways so that it affects different people. So in Cosmos, something that I learned is different people cry at different moments of the piece. And the arc is different for everybody. It's different for the people that are in the headset, and it's also different to the people that are going in the audience. People in the audience tend to cry within the same 3 scenes, give and take. People in the headset tend to cry in the same 2 to 3 scenes. But if they cry here, they won't cry here. Some cries here, they cry there, but they won't cry here. You know, and it changes and it varies, and there's a lot of people that will come out and at first they don't think anything of it, and then 3 days later, I get a message going, "Oh, I got home and I couldn't stop crying," you know, because the balls dropped, and that's where the interesting bit comes. It's the universality of the themes. So I know it's the last question. My grandfather had cancer, and I found out my grandfather had cancer when I had just gone back to school in 1998. And I realized that I couldn't give anything to my grandfather because I was poor, broke as a joke, you know, being in school because I had a scholarship. And I decided to take a sabbatical, go back to Mexico, and offer my grandfather the only thing that I could give him, which was my time. And I made sure that I was there for him, and that I would give him the quality of life that he should get. And that was it. That was my gift to him. You know, my love, my attention, my time. And in that period, my grandfather decided to drop all the knowledge that he had in his head, which was great. You know, a lot of it happened at 5:30 in the morning. Some of it happened at 7. You know, I used to sit with him and have to watch soap operas, which I hate. But he couldn't go to the movies. So the only thing he could do was watch soap operas, and he will fall asleep halfway through them. So I had to watch him so that when he woke up, I could tell him what the hell had just happened, you know? Which, believe me, Maria did not love him. But aside of all that, one day, it was one of those afternoons, we're sitting on the porch, and my grandfather looked at me and said that there is something of me in every single person in this world. And at the moment that I was aware that there was something in me, in you, you will realize there's something of you in me. And if that happened, I would never, ever hurt you, because it would be like hurting myself. And if I can do that with every single person that I meet, then I know that I'm going to love every single one of those people. If then I can create a piece that allows you to see something of you in there, and then allows another stranger to see that also in that piece, it means that both of you have something in common. And therefore you'll never hurt each other. And my job as an artist is to create pieces that allow you to find something of you in somebody else, and something of somebody else in you.
That is incredible, and I love ending on such a positive note. Thank you so much for being here and giving us your time. It's been incredible, and I hope that this is the first of many. When you retell the story of language, and when you finish with that project in Mexico, we hope to have you back so you can tell us more about it. So thank you very much.
Thank you.